The sun was setting. The sky turned orange, and the ocean glowed like gold. Kofi, the fisherman, sat alone in his small wooden boat. The waves were calm, but his heart was restless. He hadn't caught anything all day. His net stayed empty, and his stomach growled. "If I don't catch something tonight," Kofi said to himself, "my family will go hungry again." He sighed and looked at the horizon. The village lights twinkled far away. He knew people whispered behind his back. They said he was cursed, that the sea no longer favored him. But Kofi didn't believe in curses. He believed in hard work. Suddenly, his net tightened. It jerked hard, pulling the boat to one side. Kofi grabbed the ropes quickly. "Finally, a big catch," he said, smiling for the first time that day. He pulled with all his strength. The net was heavy. It felt like a giant fish was caught. His arms burned, but he didn't stop. Slowly, the net came out of the water. But what he saw made him freeze. Inside the net was not a fish. It was a creature. She looked like a woman, but her lower body was covered in shining scales. A long, beautiful tail replaced her legs. Her dark hair floated around her like seaweed. Her eyes glowed faintly, and her skin looked smooth and pale, almost like the moon. Kofi's jaw dropped. "A mermaid," he whispered. The creature stared at him with calm, steady eyes. Her lips moved, and a voice came out. It was soft and strange, like waves crashing gently on rocks. "Let me go," she said. Kofi stepped back, his heart racing. He didn't believe in curses, but he had heard stories about mermaids. Some said they brought fortune, while others warned they were dangerous. "You can talk?" Kofi asked, his voice shaking. "Yes," the mermaid replied. "And I warn you, fisherman, release me now." Kofi stared at her. His mind raced. If he took her to the village, everyone would talk about him. He would no longer be a nobody. He could be a hero. Maybe the chief would reward him. Maybe the merchants would pay a fortune to see her. "Why should I let you go?" he asked. "You're my catch." The mermaid's eyes darkened. The water around the boat rippled. "I am no ordinary catch. I am a guardian of the ocean. My purpose is to protect the sea and its creatures." Kofi laughed nervously. "You expect me to believe that? You're just a mermaid." The mermaid's voice grew colder. "You don't understand, fisherman. There is a dark force deep in the ocean. It wants to destroy everything, your people, your village, and even the land. I am the only one who can stop it. If you keep me here, the darkness will rise." Kofi frowned. He didn't believe her. He was just a poor fisherman trying to survive. Why would the ocean care about him? "I don't want to hurt you," the mermaid continued. "But the sea will not forgive this." Kofi's hands tightened on the net. He shook his head. "No, you're coming with me. The village needs to see this. They'll finally respect me." The mermaid sighed deeply. Her glowing eyes sparkled. "You've made a mistake," she said. "The sea will show you its anger." Kofi reached the shore just as night fell. The village was quiet, but a few people saw him dragging his boat. Their eyes widened when they noticed the creature in his net. "Kofi, what is that?" one man asked, pointing at the mermaid. "A mermaid," Kofi said proudly. "I caught her." Soon, a crowd gathered around. They whispered and gasped, staring at the strange being. Some looked amazed, while others seemed frightened. "She's beautiful," one woman said. "She's a demon," said another. The chief arrived, leaning on his wooden staff. He was an old man with a wise face. He looked at Kofi, then at the mermaid. His expression was serious. "Kofi," the chief said, "do you know what you've done?" "I caught a mermaid," Kofi said, puffing out his chest. "She's proof that I'm not cursed. The sea has blessed me." The chief frowned. He walked closer to the creature. The mermaid met his gaze with calm, glowing eyes. "This is no blessing," the chief said. "Mermaids are sacred. They are protectors of the sea. Taking her from the water could bring great danger." "She's lying," Kofi said. "She's just trying to scare us." Before the chief could reply, a loud crash echoed from the shore. The waves grew bigger and slammed against the rocks. The wind picked up, howling through the village. People screamed and ran for shelter. The mermaid's voice rose above the chaos. You have until sunrise, fisherman. Return me to the ocean, or your people will suffer. Kofi froze. The villagers stared at him, their faces pale with fear. What do we do? Someone asked. The chief looked at Kofi. This is your decision. Kofi, will you save us or keep her? Kofi hesitated. The mermaid's glowing eyes seemed to pierce through him. The waves roared louder, as if waiting for his answer. Kofi stood frozen, the weight of the mermaid's words pressing heavily on his chest. The ocean had turned restless, and the once calm waves now crashed violently against the shore. It was as if the sea itself was angry, warning him to make the right choice. Around him, the villagers were in a panic. They ran in all directions, searching for safety from the rising storm. But the storm wasn't just in the air. It was in the very ocean, in the very heart of the world Kofi had always known. You must return me, the mermaid repeated, her voice now full of urgency. Do not ignore what I've said. You will regret it if you do. Kofi stared at her. Her eyes were not like anything he had ever seen. There was power in them, a deep, ancient power that seemed to reach into his soul and twist it. But at the same time, he couldn't ignore the pull of the crowd around him. The village was looking at him, waiting for him to decide. The chief stepped forward, his face grave. Kofi, listen to the mermaid. She speaks the truth. Kofi turned to face the chief, shaking his head. No, chief. I'm not a fool. She's just trying to scare us. I've seen fishermen talk about creatures like her, but I've never believed it. She's just a creature from the deep, not some guardian. She's nothing more than a prize. You don't understand, the chief said, his voice sharp. The sea is not just water. It is alive with magic. And that magic is older than anything we know. The mermaid, she is the ocean's protector, the one who keeps the balance. If you take her, if you keep her from the sea, everything will fall apart. Kofi looked back at the mermaid. Her eyes never left him, calm yet piercing, as if she knew his every thought. He had lived his whole life as a poor fisherman, scraping by with the little he caught. This mermaid was his chance to change all of that. He could be famous. He could become someone the village respected. His name would be known across the land. But at what cost? What will happen if I don't return you? Kofi asked, his voice trembling slightly. The mermaid closed her eyes, as if the answer pained her. If you keep me, the darkness will rise. It is already stirring. It has been sleeping for centuries, but it has awoken. And once it rises, it will destroy everything. The sea, the land, the village. Nothing will be left. Not even you. The wind howled around them, and the ocean roared louder, as if the very waters were alive and angry. The sky above was dark, filled with swirling clouds, and the air smelled of salt and impending danger. The ground trembled beneath Kofi's feet. It felt as though the whole world was shaking, and he wasn't sure how much more it could take. You think I can stop it? Kofi asked, his voice barely above a whisper. No, the mermaid replied. Only I can. But I need the ocean to do my work. You must release me. Kofi stood there, torn. A part of him wanted to believe her. A part of him understood that the sea was more than just water. It was life. It was everything to him, to his village. Without the sea, there would be no fish, no food, no life. But another part of him couldn't let go of the idea of the glory that awaited him. The mermaid was a living treasure, a creature that could make him famous, a creature the world had never seen. And he had her in his grasp. The villagers were still watching him, their faces filled with fear and hope. The chief's eyes were filled with pleading. Kofi's heart raced. What was the right thing to do? Then he heard a voice. It wasn't from the mermaid or the chief. It came from the very ocean itself. The sound was deep, guttural, and full of malice. You will regret this, fisherman, the voice said. The sea does not forgive those who betray it. Kofi moved around, his eyes wide. What was that? Did you hear that? The mermaid's eyes widened as well. The dark force is waking. It speaks through the ocean itself. It will rise soon, and when it does, it will come for you. It will come for all of you. Kofi's breath caught in his throat. He could feel it now, the dark presence in the air, the shift in the world. The wind howled more violently, and the waves crashed higher. The storm was no longer a distant threat. It was here, right in front of them. The chief grabbed Kofi by the arm, shaking him. "Kofi, you have to listen. You must release her. Now. If you don't, everything we know will be gone. You'll bring destruction upon us all." Kofi's mind was in confusion. He wanted to believe the chief. He wanted to trust the mermaid. But the greed inside him, the hunger for a better life, pulled him in another direction. "I can't," he said, his voice shaky. "I need this. I need her." The mermaid's eyes grew cold, distant. "Then you are doomed. The sea will remember your choice." Kofi turned his back on her, stepping away from the boat. The storm raged stronger, the ocean rising higher and higher. The waves were now crashing against the shore like thunder. Kofi could feel the power of the sea pressing in on him, squeezing his chest, as if trying to choke the life out of him. "What do you mean, doomed?" Kofi asked, his voice shaking. "What's happening?" The mermaid's voice was quiet now, but full of warning. "The darkness will come for the land first. It will take the fish, the water, and then the people. It will leave nothing but destruction in its wake." Kofi's heart raced. The ground trembled beneath his feet as the sea surged forward. He felt the pull of the ocean, the weight of the mermaid's words pressing on him like a storm cloud. His thoughts raced. Could he really be the one to save his village? Could he let go of his greed and return the mermaid to the ocean before it was too late? Or had he already made a mistake that could cost everyone everything? The sky darkened, and the wind roared. Kofi could see the shadows on the water, swirling in unnatural patterns, as if something beneath the surface was stirring, ready to rise. "Please," the mermaid whispered. "I don't want to see what's coming. But you must let me go." Kofi felt his heart pound in his chest. The storm, the sea, the dark presence rising from the depths, it was too much. His decision, his mistake, had brought them to this point. He took one last look at the mermaid, her eyes filled with sorrow, and he knew he had to make a choice. The ocean was alive. The sea was angry, and it would not forgive him if he made the wrong one. Kofi stood frozen as the mermaid's warning echoed in his ears. The dark force from the ocean was waking, and the storm was already here, roaring louder with each passing second. The sea surged higher, the waves crashing violently against the shore, almost as if the very earth was fighting against him. Every instinct in him told him he needed to make a decision. But the pull of greed, the hunger for wealth and fame, was hard to ignore. His hands shook as he tightened his grip on the boat, feeling the cold of the ocean in his bones. The mermaid's voice was like a whisper in the storm, but it still reached him. "Kofi, you must choose now. The darkness is coming, and it will destroy everything you know." He looked back at her. The mermaid's once radiant scales now seemed dull and clouded, her body taut with tension as if the very air around them was holding its breath. Her eyes, the same eyes that had once seemed full of mystery and allure, were now filled with sadness. Kofi could see the pain in her face. She wasn't just a creature of the sea. She was a protector. She had warned him. She had tried to make him understand, but his greed had clouded his judgment. But as the storm grew more violent, a small, quiet voice inside Kofi began to question everything. Was his future really worth betraying the ocean, the very force that had given him life? The fish he caught, the livelihood of his village, all came from the sea. Without the ocean, there would be nothing. The mermaid's voice grew louder, more urgent. "If you do not release me, everything will be lost. Your village, your people, the sea itself, it will all fall to the darkness. The dark force feeds on fear, on greed, and on betrayal. That is why it has come for you. That is why it is testing you now." Kofi's chest tightened as he looked up at the sky. The dark clouds formed turbulently above them. The storm was no longer just a natural phenomenon. It felt like something deeper, something ancient, and he could feel it in his bones, that something was coming, something powerful and dangerous. It wasn't just the mermaid's warnings anymore. The world was shifting, and it was all because of his decision. But as the storm raged, Kofi heard a sound that made his heart stop, a low, rumbling sound coming from the depths of the sea. He turned toward the water, his heart racing. There, in the distance, the sea was boiling. Huge waves crashed against the rocks, sending splashes of water high into the air. It was as if the very ocean was alive, angry and alive in a way he had never seen before. The mermaid's voice was barely audible over the roar of the storm. "You cannot fight it, Kofi. The darkness will consume you, and it will consume everything you love. It has been waiting for a long time. The only way to stop it is to release me." Kofi's legs felt weak beneath him, his body trembling as he fought against the pull of the storm, the pull of the ocean. He could feel the sea trying to drag him in, pulling at his feet, urging him to make a choice. The villagers had all gathered at the edge of the shore, looking toward Kofi with anxious eyes. The chief stood at the front, his hands clasped in prayer. "Kofi," he shouted over the wind, "you must do what is right. You must listen to her. We cannot survive without the ocean, and we cannot survive without the balance it brings." But Kofi could feel the weight of the choices pressing down on him. Could he really let go of the mermaid? After all this time? After all the promises of fame, wealth, and power? Could he really give it all up, just like that? The ocean rumbled again, louder this time, as if impatient with his hesitation. Kofi stumbled back, his heart pounding in his chest. His mind was racing, his thoughts spinning out of control. The mermaid had warned him. The sea itself had warned him. But the temptation of his dreams, the promises of a life he had always wanted, were too strong. He turned back to the mermaid. "Why should I trust you?" he asked, his voice raw with emotion. "Why should I believe that this dark force is real? What proof do I have that it will come for us?" The mermaid's face was pale, her eyes filled with a mixture of sorrow and understanding. "You are not the first to question me," she said quietly. "And you may not be the last. But the darkness is not something you can see with your eyes. It is something that feeds on fear, on betrayal. It comes when the balance is broken, and when people like you refuse to listen. It is already in the depths of the sea, stirring beneath the surface. If you do not return me to my home, it will rise, and it will take everything." Kofi's hands clenched into fists as he looked out at the sea. The waves were now crashing with greater force, as though they were angry at him for even thinking about keeping the mermaid captive. He could feel the pressure building in the air, a sense of impending doom hanging over him. But then, something strange happened. The sea calmed, just for a moment. The waves slowed, and the wind died down, leaving an awkward silence. In that silence, Kofi heard it again, a voice, deep and rumbling, coming from the water itself. "You are running out of time," the voice said, its tone dark and cold. "You cannot stop what is coming. The darkness will claim this land, and it will claim you. All that is left is to decide how you want to die." Kofi's heart raced. The fear in the voice was unmistakable, but it was not his own fear. It was the fear of the ocean, of the very forces that controlled life and death. Kofi could feel the weight of the decision on his shoulders. He was not just deciding the fate of himself and his village. He was deciding the fate of the entire world. And in that moment, he understood. The mermaid wasn't just a creature of myth. She was the guardian of the ocean, the protector of the balance between the land and the sea. And if he didn't make the right choice, if he didn't release her, the darkness would rise, and everything he knew would be destroyed. Kofi's legs gave way, and he collapsed to his knees. He looked up at the mermaid, her eyes full of sorrow, and felt a deep pang of regret. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I didn't understand. I was too blinded by my own greed. But I will set things right. I will release you." The mermaid's expression softened, and she nodded, a single tear slipping from her eye. "It is not too late, Kofi. But you must hurry." With great effort, Kofi rose to his feet and made his way to the boat. He had to set things right. The storm raged once more, but this time, he wasn't afraid. He knew what he had to do. As he pushed the boat into the water, the mermaid's voice rang out one last time. "Remember, Kofi, the ocean is not a place to be conquered. It is a place to be respected, and it will remember what you do. Kofi nodded, his heart heavy with the knowledge that the fate of his village, his people, and the entire world rested on his decision. Kofi's boat moved gently in the water as he pushed it further from the shore. The waves had quieted, though the storm still loomed in the distance. The air felt thick with tension, like the world was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. The mermaid, her tail moving in the moonlight, was beside him now, her face calm but serious. "Are you sure you're ready for this?" she asked, her voice softer than before but still filled with urgency. Kofi nodded, though his heart pounded in his chest. "I don't know," he admitted, "but I can't let my people suffer for my mistakes. I've seen the darkness that the ocean is warning me about. I've heard its voice, and I can feel it in the air." The mermaid's eyes seemed to glow faintly as she spoke again. "The darkness is rising, and you must choose whether to protect the ocean or let it fall. If the balance is not restored, the sea will be consumed by the force of greed, and everything will perish. If you release me, I can fight it, but I cannot do it alone." Kofi felt the weight of the decision settling on his shoulders like an anchor pulling him deeper into the water. There was no turning back now. The boat drifted closer to the open water, where the sea stretched out endlessly into the night. The mermaid's eyes never left Kofi's face, her gaze searching for any sign of doubt, any last hesitation. He swallowed hard, feeling the sting of regret as he thought of his past mistakes. He had been selfish, driven by a desire for wealth and recognition. He had captured the mermaid, thinking he could control her, make her grant him endless fortune. But now, he realized how much he had underestimated the ocean, and how much he had taken it for granted. "I'm ready," Kofi said, his voice steady, though the storm inside him hadn't calmed. "What do I need to do?" The mermaid gave him a small smile, but it was bittersweet. "All you have to do is set me free. Open your heart to the ocean, and trust in what you know to be right. If you release me, I will return to the sea where I belong, and I will fight the darkness that threatens us all." Kofi took a deep breath, and with trembling hands, he untied the ropes that had bound the mermaid to the boat. As soon as the last knot came undone, the mermaid slipped gracefully into the water, her tail flicking with a soft splash. For a moment, the world seemed to stop. The winds died down, and the waves fell still. Kofi stood at the edge of the boat, watching her, waiting for her to disappear into the depths. But the mermaid didn't leave. Instead, she turned back to face him. Her eyes shone with a fierce determination, and Kofi could feel the power radiating from her like a pulse beneath the water. "You have made the right choice, Kofi," she said, her voice full of strength. "The darkness cannot rise now, but it will still try to fight back. It will not let go easily." Kofi nodded, his voice steady but laden with emotion. "It's not just what I want, it's what's right," he said, gazing at the horizon where the sky kissed the ocean. "You belong to the sea, not to me or anyone else. Taking you away would be wrong, no matter how much I've lost or how much I wish to regain." The mermaid tilted her head, her luminous eyes studying him as if searching for the truth in his soul. "You are a rare one, Kofi," she said, her voice soft yet resonating with a profound sense of respect. "Humans often act out of greed or fear, but you have shown something few possess: honor." She placed a delicate hand on the edge of the canoe. "Your kindness will not go unnoticed. Return to your people with an open heart, and may your nets never be empty again." Kofi's throat tightened as he nodded silently. He wanted to say more, to express his gratitude, but the lump in his throat made words impossible. The mermaid turned to the water, her tail flicking once in anticipation. She paused for a brief moment and looked back at him, her gaze filled with something unspoken, a silent bond that would never fade. Then, with a powerful sweep of her tail, she dove into the sea. Her movements were graceful, slicing through the water like a blade of silver under the sun's first rays. As she disappeared into the depths, the ocean erupted in a brilliant display of swirling light, an otherworldly glow that painted the waves with hues of gold and blue. It was as if the sea itself had come alive to welcome her back, rejoicing in the return of one of its own. Kofi sat frozen, his canoe rocking gently in the suddenly serene waters. The rhythmic sound of the waves, now steady and calm. He felt an odd mixture of loss and peace, but deep in his heart, he knew he had made the right decision. He picked up his paddle and began the long journey back to shore. As he approached the village, he noticed something unusual. The beach, which had been barren for weeks, was bustling with activity. Fishermen pulled nets brimming with fish onto the shore, their faces lit with joy and disbelief. The air was filled with laughter, and the aroma of fresh catches wafted through the breeze. "Kofi is back," someone shouted as his canoe neared the sand. A crowd gathered quickly, their cheers echoing across the shoreline. "The curse is broken," an elder proclaimed. "Kofi has brought the sea's blessings back to us." Before Kofi could explain, the villagers lifted him out of his canoe and carried him on their shoulders, chanting his name. "Kofi the Brave, Kofi the Redeemer." Word of the miraculous turn of events traveled swiftly to the palace. The king, a wise and benevolent ruler, had been deeply concerned about the village's plight. When he heard that Kofi had braved the ocean to restore balance and prosperity, he decided that such bravery deserved recognition. "Kofi has not only restored our fishermen's fortunes but has also shown selflessness and wisdom," the king declared to his court. "Such a man must be honored." Messengers were sent to summon Kofi to the palace. The village erupted in celebration at the news, their joy spilling into every corner of the community. The day of the celebration arrived, and the entire village gathered to accompany Kofi to the palace. Drummers led the procession, their beats echoing through the fields and hills. Women adorned in vibrant Kent cloth danced and sang songs of praise for Kofi, while children waved palm fronds in excitement. When they arrived at the palace, the king himself came out to greet Kofi. The grand hall was decorated with fine silks and golden ornaments, and a feast unlike any the villagers had seen awaited them. The grand hall fell silent as the king rose from his ornate throne, his majestic robe shimmering under the light of the flickering torches. All eyes turned to him, and the room was thick with anticipation. The king's voice, deep and commanding, carried across the hall with a tone that commanded both respect and admiration. "Kofi," he began, his gaze steady as it rested on the humble fisherman standing before him. "Your actions have proven to us all the true meaning of bravery and selflessness. When others might have succumbed to despair or sought personal gain, you chose the path of righteousness. You faced the sea, not with fear but with purpose, and in doing so, you have brought life back to our waters." The crowd erupted in murmurs of agreement, but the king raised his hand, and silence quickly returned. "You have restored not just fish to our nets," he continued, his voice swelling with emotion, "but also hope to our hearts. Your deeds remind us that courage and integrity can bring light even in the darkest times. For this, Kofi, we honor you as a hero of our people." A royal attendant stepped forward, holding a small velvet cushion upon which rested a gleaming medallion. The king took the medallion, its golden surface intricately engraved with the words, "Kofi the Brave, Redeemer of the Sea." The king turned back to Kofi, his expression warm. "This medallion is not merely a token of our gratitude but a symbol of the legacy you leave behind. Wear it proudly, for it will remind all who see it of the strength of one man's courage." With a solemn yet proud smile, the king placed the medallion around Kofi's neck. The crowd erupted into cheers, their voices rising in unison to celebrate their hero. But the king was not finished. He gestured for another attendant, who stepped forward with a detailed model of a canoe carved from polished wood. "Kofi," the king said, "a fisherman's canoe is his lifeline. You have earned one befitting of your status. I present to you a new canoe, larger and sturdier than your old one. May it carry you safely across the waters, no matter the storms you face." The applause grew louder, the crowd now standing to show their approval. Kofi, overwhelmed by the honor, bowed deeply, his hands trembling as he accepted the symbolic model of his new vessel. "And one more gift," the king announced, his voice rising above the cheers. "To ensure your prosperity and that of your family for generations to come, I grant you a parcel of fertile land near the river. It shall be yours to farm, to build upon, and to cherish. Let it serve as a testament to the blessings you have brought to our people." Tears welled in Kofi's eyes as the crowd roared their approval once more. He had arrived at the palace as a humble fisherman, uncertain of how he would be received, and now he stood as a celebrated hero, his name etched into the history of the land. The celebration lasted well into the night. Drums thundered, feet pounded the earth in joyous rhythm, and the sky was alight with torches and laughter. Kofi, once the object of ridicule, now sat at the center of it all, a humble smile on his face. As the days turned into weeks, Kofi's name spread beyond the village. Travelers, traders, and even scholars came to hear the story of the fisherman who had tamed the sea. Some embellished the tale, speaking of how Kofi had fought off sea monsters or commanded the waves with a single word. But Kofi never corrected them. He knew the truth, and so did the sea. Life in the village flourished. The once dwindling markets overflowed with fish, bringing prosperity to every household. Kofi, now a respected leader, used his newfound influence to teach the villagers about gratitude and balance. He often spoke of respecting nature, urging them to never take more than they needed from the ocean. And while he became a celebrated figure, Kofi remained humble. Late at night, he would sometimes walk to the shore, staring out at the endless waves. In the distance, he imagined he could hear the faint, melodic laughter of the mermaid, a reminder of the bond they shared and the secret they kept. This continuation celebrates Kofi's journey, weaving in themes of redemption, bravery, and the importance of selflessness. The grandeur of the celebration and the king's recognition reflect his transformation from an outcast to a hero, while the mermaid's silent contribution highlights the unseen forces that work in harmony with human virtue.